Hey guys, Matthew here, and welcome to the part 2 of my Path of Exile 3.12 Heist League starter. It is obviously the same totem build that I was talking about the other day, except in this video we'll be covering the actual endgame build. I'm not going to talk too much about the different mechanics of the build since they were all explained in my previous video. So if you haven't checked that out and you're wondering how the build actually functions, you can check that out. In this video, I want to just talk about the reason why the build does damage, how much damage you can expect, how much it should cost you to make the build in its entirety, and what you can expect to basically be clearing with the build, as well as the items and how to what you're going to be looking for essentially. So as I said, I already spoke about the skill tree, I already spoke about the interaction of MOM and agnostic. If you look, this is a level 92, because this is pretty much the build that I'll be running. I'll be switching over from my ball lightning to Glacial Cascade around level 92, because at that point I should have both the currency and obviously the levels to put into the cluster jewels. So that's probably going to be my main focus around level 92. Now, the build has 3.8k life. Now, that probably doesn't sound like a lot, and you would be right to say that that's not a lot, but when I get into the items, you'll see why that is and why it's easy to actually push the build way past like 5 to 6k health. Because we have the entirety of the silent life wheel, we have this here, we have this here, we have this, we have this, we have this, we have that. We have a bunch of life on the tree. We have 143% life on the tree, so it is easy to push this build to 5-6k health. With a few more levels and of course better items, because when I do get in the items, it's actually pretty atrocious. But our other line of defense is the fact that we are MOM alongside Divine Guidance, which means 40% of our damage is taken to mana before life. So this mana pool here is essentially additional life. So while we look fairly squishy at 3.8, we are realistically at 6.2k health. Now that also probably doesn't look that good, but there is a way to make it even better. We are actually going to use Steel Skin, which is an additional 2,200 life, essentially, or effective life pool with Second Wind, which gives us about a 50% uptime. And since we also use Dynamo for guard skills have 25% increased duration, we end up with almost not quite permanent uptime, but over 50% uptime on the Steel Skin, which is very, very nice, because it's pretty much a shield of over 2,000 damage that it can take. That is up. I have it on my left mouse click, so it's pretty much going up every single time I'm moving, as long as it's up. Now I don't have it linked properly. It's not the right item level. My Second Wind is not level. Like, this character is only level 70. So this is not quite what you should expect from your own. You should expect it to be up quite a bit more than that if you build according to this PoB. So let's talk about the items, since the effective life pool is about 8,000, meaning we are pretty tanky. We also have endurance charges. We are also using Taste of Hate, which means some of that physical damage is going to be taken as cold. We've got a fair bit of layers of defense. Not only that, we have full screen AoE freezes through 4 totems, which are basically clearing full screen and freezing everything. So that's another good layer of defense, obviously. We could even go with a shield if we really wanted to, or there's also some potential for more defense in our flask setup, since we are not running, as you can see, we're not running any type of really defensive flask except for Wise Oak and Taste of Hate, but these are more for resistances than really for defense. We could easily, though, throw out, say, the Silver Flask, lose a little bit of damage, a little bit of speed, but instead gain a bunch of armor or percent damage taken from a basalt or whatever it is. So if you feel a little bit squishy, you can always do that. Now, if you actually feel squishy with this build, that would be really strange to me, but who knows. Anyways, let's get into the actual gear and the gear choices. So we are going to be looking real quick. If you want to take a screenshot or pause the video and read through this real quick, this is basically I made a list of the items and about what I expect to pay for them. Some of these prices are obviously not going to be at all what they're really going to cost on League Start. It really comes down to meta. It really comes down to supply. It really comes down to demand of certain items. So it's hard to predict everything that's not just a regular unique item or some generic life res item, because those are pretty much the same every single league. But my estimate is that I should probably be able to buy and make every single one of these items for about 100 chaos. And that would be on the end of the first day of a league. Now, of course, if I was to build this character on the third day of a league, it is quite possible that the items have all doubled in price, or maybe even more. We don't really know. Maybe that's going to be the price of a single cluster jewel. It's really hard to predict, but I'm 99% confident that if I build this character at the end of the first day of my first day of playing, I'm going to be able to get it all for about 100 chaos, including the cluster jewels and literally everything else. That's my estimate, which, if you look at last league, that was the price of a single tremor rod on the second day of a league. So I think it's fair to assume that 100C is pretty cheap for what this build can actually achieve, which is basically all the content in the game. So real quick though, I do want to mention this. People are probably looking at the damage right now, 250k, and being like, what? That's really low. And I can't deny that that seems pretty bad. The thing is, PoB kind of sucks at calculating totem DPS, and not only that, it kind of sucks at calculating Glacial Cascade DPS, because Glacial Cascade has some AoE overlap, which means you can hit the same enemy multiple times with the same cascade, and you also have multiple totems, so the DPS is probably about 10 times higher than this. Now, that only takes the DPS up to about 2.5 million, but 2.5 million DPS for a build with 8,000 effective life pool and 100 chaos for the full price, to me, seems pretty good. Now, you can actually, I'll actually go ahead and mouse over the items real quick. I'll skip the wands because that's what I want to finish with, because these are pretty interesting. But helmet, generic life and res helmet, 1 life roll and 1 res roll, crafted double res. This should cost you a chaos, literally, no more than that. Soul mantle, probably a couple chaos or a few chaos, and then the filing prophecy is like 10C, so that basically is all you need. That is going to give you a pseudo 6 link, and that'll carry you easily all the way to red maps. Now, when it comes to very, very end game stuff like Awakener level 8, I'm pretty sure you can do it on a 5 link, but it might take a while and require you to run around in circles for a while because your damage might not be that great. Orcs, that's one of my go-to every single league because I love Chaos Recipe. It's how I make almost all my currency, or at least like 50-60% of my currency within the first 3 to 4 days of a league is entirely through Chaos Recipe. I'm a big fan of it. I advertise for it every single league. People don't trust me, don't believe me in how good it is, but it really is very, very strong. If you're well equipped for it, you got the proper filter, the proper tools, etc., etc. We're just going to use a regular low-level pair of two-tone boots with a little bit of life and some move speed, crafted double res, we're done. Now, these could easily be changed for a pair of boots with 60 life, 25 move speed, and then 140 res, and then crafted double res. It really doesn't matter. I just put in some two-tone because it has double res, but if the price of two-tones is too expensive, skip out and just get a regular pair of boots. It really doesn't matter. These boots, when I look at them right now, are pretty atrocious. The amulet that we're using is just life, little bit of res. We are allocating Prodigal Perfection, which is about a 2C anoint because it has 2 Azure Oil, so very cheap there. The most important part is that we use a Jade Amulet for the Dexterity. Now, we are a non-crit build, so we don't need multi, we don't need crit chance, we don't need any of these expensive stats. Cast speed is one of the best stats for us because your cast speed actually affects your totems. So cast speed, the only reason why we get it is for DPS. As you can see, we get about 10% DPS from this. Now, of course, some of that is due to the anoint, but still, it is going to give us a little bit of boost to our DPS. Essence Worm is used to make the whole combination of Supreme Ego, Agnostic, MOM combination work pretty well. Obviously, Supreme Ego gives you 50% more mana reserve, so if you have a 50% aura, it becomes 75% of your mana. So at that point, your Agnostic MOM combination becomes pretty useless because you don't have enough mana to actually tank anything for you. So either you'll die or you'll just be running around with no mana all the time. Both of these situations suck, so we actually go ahead and use an Essence Worm. Essence Worm might be expensive. I've seen it as high as 15 chaos on the first day of the league, and I've seen it as low as 2 to 3 chaos. Expectation is that I'll pay between 4 and 7 for it. A random Crusader ring, item level 75, is required for tier 1 reduced effective curses on you, which is how we are going to get unaffected by curses. We get 35% here, we get another 20% on the tree, and then finally 40% from Numbing Elixir for a total of 95% reduced effective curses on you, meaning we're not quite curse immune, but we are very, very close, and the investment is rather small for how much tankiness that actually allows us to get. Also, quality of life is another big one with over 700 life regen per second. Otherwise, we are just using one of my other all-time favorite for League Start, which is Brandis Blazon. It gives us up to 30 all attributes, which is a lot. It's basically like getting a 30% dexterity node with a 30% strength node alongside a 30% int node, all in one small belt. And on top of that, it also has a little bit of fire res, which is quite nice. But the biggest reason I use it is because, like I said, I'm a big fan of Chaos Recipe, and that 8% quantity of items found is pretty huge. Now, you could also use Bisco's Leash. It's probably better, to be honest, but the thing is, Bisco's Leash tends to be expensive at the start of a league because it is used by MF group finders, especially, and unfortunately, they raised the price to the point where, as a single player, just rushing maps, Brandis Blazon tends to be my go-to, and also because that all attributes really can come in clutch a lot of the time. The flasks are pretty whatever. You could easily remove Taste of Hate or Wise Oak if they happen to be expensive for some reason. Now, I don't expect Wise Oak to be any more than 2 to 3 chaos, because that's pretty much the go-to price at the very beginning of the league, and it's one of my first items that I'll be buying. Taste of Hate, though, can be expensive. I've seen it as high as 20C on the first day of the league. I've seen it as low as 5C or even less than that. So it really depends on both the meta, the supply, and the demand. So if you can't afford a Taste of Hate, it's a decent chunk of damage, but you can easily just go ahead and throw in a Basalt Flask for instead tankiness. And if I feel personally like my damage is high enough that I don't need that and I'm clearing maps just fine, I'm actually going to drop Taste of Hate for Basalt for the additional defense. And I'd say you should probably do the same. Otherwise, Cluster Jewels. We are using one of the Flask Cluster Jewel for Numbing Elixir for that 40% Flask effect. We're using a Self-Flagellation because obviously we use Soul Mantle. We are nullifying the curses as I previously explained. So it's pretty much anywhere from 120 to 200% increased damage. So that's pretty nice. The jewels that we're getting, since we're a non-crit build, there's not a whole lot of things that actually give us damage. So we're going with either generic damage, cold damage, stuff like that. And then obviously the best stat that we can get for damage is going to be some type of cast speed. So cast speed while dual wielding, or just regular cast speed. But again, if those are expensive, just get yourself some generic 1-stat damage with % life. If you need resistances to help cap out because your gear is too shitty, go ahead and get some resistance on your jewel. If you need some dexterity, potentially, which you might, go ahead and get dexterity on your jewels. You're going to have 3 open jewel slots. So easy to cap out some resistances that you're missing or some stats. Now, another thing that I tend to buy very, very early in the league is going to be a Corrupted Blood. Cannot be inflicted on you jewel. So that allows me to not run a Bleed Flask, which I hate running anyways. So instead, I just get a Corrupted Blood jewel. Bleeding doesn't really kill you very often. What tends to kill you is the Corrupted Blood debuff, which stacks. And then when you move, it stacks more. And then the more you move, the more damage you take. That's typically what kills you, because bleeding itself is just a regular physical damage degen, which barely does any damage if you have any kind of damage reduction. And since we have a good bit of damage reduction to physical through endurance charges and whatnot, we don't care too much about bleeding all the time. So I would recommend getting a Corrupted Blood Jewel as fast as possible. It's one of my go-to first thing in the league. Is one of first thing I get in the league. One of the first things, anyways, is going to be a Corrupted Blood Jewel every single league, and I normally never pay more than 5C for this. We are using Spire Stone. The reason is quite simple, honestly. Totems cannot be stunned. That's that. Clear Mind, not necessary, but a nice little bit of additional damage. As you can see, 6% damage from this. It gives you up to 60% spell damage while no mana is reserved, and since we reserve no mana on the build, since we are a 1 aura build using Essence Worm, it just gives us a little bit a decent little bit of chunk of damage, and then also some mana regen. Not mandatory whatsoever, could easily be changed into another regular damage jewel or even percent life jewel if you feel like you want to be tankier. Or you could even go with an Abyss jewel with flat life instead, because as you saw from the gear, there's almost no flat life anywhere, because the gear is just really bad. Quite frankly, really bad. Now, one of the most expensive part that I'm expecting to pay for is going to be these Cluster Jewel here with the effective non-curse aura from your skills. Now, what's great for us is that Vengeful Commander is an item level 1 notable, meaning we can actually get the lowest level medium Cluster Jewel with 1 jewel socket possible that has any amount of non-curse aura, effective non-curse aura from your skills, and then simply alt spam for Vengeful Commander and we'll be done. We need 2 of those. I expect it to pay no more than 10-ish chaos per cluster, potentially even less than 5 chaos. It really depends on, again, the supply and demand for those. And then the last jewel that we're going to be using is either a Fire, Cold, Lightning, or Elemental damage jewel with 2 jewel sockets. Once again, Vengeful Commander being an item level 1 notable, we don't really care about it. So we get the cheapest possible large cluster jewel. Now, these used to be expensive because 2 jewel sockets used to be restricted by item level, but now that is no longer the case. So you could technically drop a large cluster jewel as low as whatever is the lowest item level required for large cluster jewels to drop, and they would have 2 jewel sockets. So that means that people can drop them in the campaign and then sell them for very cheap. And if they are too expensive with cold damage on them, again, you can easily just go ahead and buy a fire damage one or lightning damage one. Now, those small nodes would be wasted in that case, as they are right now in my path of building. I'm using fire ones because it's just a jewel that I copy pasted from the website. So all of these different nodes are giving me nothing, but that is always a solution if ever the cold ones are too expensive. Now, I don't expect that to be the case, especially with the changes to cluster jewels. I'm pretty sure I'll be able to get this with a few chaos, no more than that. So that is basically all of the items except the wands, which I'll come back to in a minute. Now, real quickly, the gem links, very simple: Overstorms, Incrit, Curse on Hit, Frostbite. So this gives us this is basically what causes the EO procs, is going to be the Overstorms with Incrit, and then Curse on Hit, Frostbite for obviously Frostbite, right? For the cursed enemies have negative 45 cold res. Now we get Flame Dash, Arcane Surge, Second Wind, Steel Skin, Flame Dash with Arcane Surge for Arcane Surge, Second Wind for cooldown recovery speed and also for +1 use, and Steel Skin for the cooldown recovery speed of itself, so that gives us more uptime on Steel Skin. As for our links, we go Glacial Cascade, Control Destruction, Cold Pen, Conk Effect, Hypothermia. Our 6th link could easily be Elemental Focus. That is by far what gives us the most damage. The problem is then we would no longer be chilling or freezing, and that's kind of really nice with Glacial Cascade, is the fact that it freezes your whole screen, which is, again, a layer of defense. Our cast when damage taken setup is Frost Bomb with Spell Cascade and Cold Snap. Cold Snap gives us basically Frenzy Charges, and obviously Frost Bomb with Spell Cascade gives exposure, so that's always nice, especially on single target. Go ahead and get hit once, so your cast when damage taken actually procs. We're going to keep this at a very low level, so not level 20, probably as low as whatever's the lowest we can, really, because we don't care too much about the level of either Cold Snap or Frost Bomb. For damage, for bosses, To be able to actually get frenzy charges on bosses, we can use Val Cold Snap, because every second gain a frenzy charge if an enemy is in the area. So we actually don't need enemies dying in the area. Unlike Cold Snap, we can just use Val Cold Snap. With Bone Chill, which increases the cold damage taken for enemies in the area as well. So Bone Chill is just good for single target as well. And then Val Righteous Fire for a huge chunk of additional DPS, burst DPS. So for bosses or whatever, just pop Val Righteous Fire and then you're good to go. Our only aura is going to be Hatred for, as you can see, triples our damage, quite literally triples our damage. So that's pretty massive. Now, in my weapon with a trigger socketed spell skill gems or on use or whatever it is called, I know that they're going to be changing that craft, but I'm still going to be using it, of course, and that's going to give me Withering Step, which is both for obviously clear speed, but also for a bit of phasing, which is nice to have and good quality of life and can easily make the mapping experience much more enjoyable. And then I would have a weapon swap with Cyclone, Portal, Cast while Channeling. So what that does is that you weapon swap and then you just Cyclone real quick, and it's going to cast a portal, unlike you having to actually go through the animation of casting a portal, which tends to be very, very long. Cast while Channeling with Cyclone on Portal will actually insta-cast the portal just as fast as if you were to press a portal scroll in your inventory. So that's pretty much the gem setup. Anything left open is up to your discretion if you want to level some gems or whatever it is. Maybe you want to have an additional cast when damage taken setup for defense. Now, I don't feel like this build is going to need any additional layers of defense, especially for my playstyle. I tend to not worry about dying too much, especially until I get to high level 90s. Before that, I play pretty recklessly. I am a streamer, so I'm typically talking with my chat. I'm not 100% focused on the game, so dying is not a big deal to me. Obviously, if you want to make the build more defensive, drop one of the damage flask, throw in a basalt, throwing a cast when damage taken with like Immortal Call or whatever you want, really. You do get endurance charges, so Immortal Call is actually not that bad of a choice. But there's a bunch of different things you can go for. We do get endurance charges from Conviction of Power. We also get power charges, which helps with proccing or EO. So overall, a pretty nice thing there. Now, the last thing I want to talk about in the video is going to be the wands, because that is probably that is probably the most important part of how to get damage on the build, is going to be getting these wands. So if you look at these wands, you'll probably thinking that these are going to be pretty hard to make. But what's interesting is that they're driftwood wands. So a wand with 70% spell damage and +1 cold, if I was to... Oh, wrong tab. If I was to look at Craft of Exile here, you will see that if I was to take any wand whatsoever and then throw in any +1, chaos, cold, fire, lightning, or whatever, it would take me 50 essences. Now, 50 essences is expensive. Now, if you look at the price of Essences of Woe, on the first day of League, you can pretty easily get them for about 2 chaos. If you live search them, the website says, this PoE Ninja says 3 chaos, but I know for a fact that you can get them for 2 chaos from doing this myself. So that would be 100 chaos, and that doesn't guarantee you to get cold or physical. It could be any of the ones you don't want. Now, the interesting part is that if you use a wand that is item level 2, that goes down to 6. So the odds of getting what you actually want, being either cold or physical, is 1 in 15. Now, since these are about 2C each, that would come down to about 30 chaos per wand. Now, that might sound fairly expensive, but let me tell you why it's really not. Anytime that you get chaos, fire, or lightning, you're going to be able to sell those wands for a lot more than it costs you to actually make them, because Shrieking Essences of Woe give you up to 82% spell damage with the additional, I believe, 12% from a Driftwood Wand implicit, for a total of almost 100% increased spell damage with 1+1 of any skill, and then you would have finished the wand with either flat lightning damage, either trigger socketed spell skill gems, or in the case of getting +1 cold or +1 fizz, that would be the wand that you would be using from there on. So these wands are actually pretty insane. I remember crafting these in Delirium League at the beginning of the league, and they sell very, very quickly, and they sell anywhere between 30 and 50 chaos, depending on the meta, of course, and which skill is more popular, meaning which one of the +1s is more popular. But I remember the cheapest one selling for about 30 chaos, and the more expensive one selling for about 50 chaos, while on average, they would cost me about 12 chaos to make, because I needed 6 essences, 2 chaos each, a craft that was, I believe, 2 or 4 chaos, so less than 20 C, and I was selling them for 30 to 50, depending on which ones, which actually was a decent way to make currency. The only bottleneck really was buying the Shrieking Essences of Woe one at a time was a little bit annoying. That being said, given the price, that given how really, really strong these wands actually are for yourself, I am personally going to be using this method to get the wands that I need. And I think that's really it about the build. Now, I can't actually show you guys because I don't have a leveled character. I'll be doing an actual proper Atlas run where I'm going to level with the BL character until around level 92, and then switch over to the Glacial Cascade character when Harvest ends. And when that happens, I'll actually be doing a run on stream. And when I do get to the end game around level 90 and switch over to Glacial Cascade, I'll go ahead and make a video just showcasing what the build looks like in the game. So for the people who aren't sure if they want to give a shot for this build yet, you can totally wait until that video comes out. It's probably going to be out around Monday or Tuesday. And until then, or between then and now, I'll just be doing some leveling runs. And when I start the Atlas run is when I'll be able to showcase the build and how well it just mercs bosses, how tanky it is, and obviously, you know, using these kind of items, because I intend to basically use the exact same thing that I intend to use for my actual league start. So as to make it fair, and to give a good showcase of what the build is going to look like. One little thing, though, is when I do actually do that, I'm going to be needing to use the threshold jewels to get 100% of my physical damage converted to cold, while on actual league start, I won't need to do this due to the recent changes to Glacial Cascade, which makes it actually 100% cold damage converted already, which is a pretty big bonus, getting the additional 2 jewel sockets and or not needing temple gloves or any kind of conversion gloves. So that's about it for the video. Hopefully you guys are looking forward to the actual showcase of the build. Hopefully you enjoyed the little guide and item choices and whatnot. Before I go, I want to say a huge thank you to my supporters: Mario, Luro, Gaikona, Kfish, Dr. Radu, Scott, Zarashi, Kevin, Castigas, and Matus. As anybody else who wishes to remain anonymous, and of course, anybody else who has supported me in the past. Big thank you to you guys. Look forward to the next video, and I'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace.